Welcome to the WebMD Health Discovered podcast. I'm Dr. Neha Pathak, WebMD's Chief Physician Editor for Health and Lifestyle Medicine. It's estimated that 8.7 million adults in the US have ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. For such a common diagnosis, it's surprising that there continues to be so many misconceptions about what ADHD actually looks like, how it impacts someone's daily life, and how there's ongoing debate and stigma about how to treat it. So, what does adult ADHD look like? The most notable characteristics of adult ADHD are difficulties maintaining attention and focus during periods of hyperactivity or excitability. For some, it can impact their ability to manage finances, keep track of expenses, follow a budget, and avoid late or last minute payments. For others, adult ADHD may impact their time management skills. So, sticking to routines, planning, predicting how much time various tasks might take. This can present challenges in both our personal and professional lives, where time management and consistency are key to our success. And for others, the challenge of adult ADHD may present in other areas where they'd like to manage impulsivity or navigate social situations. For example, inattentiveness during conversation, interrupting, or talking too much. In today's episode, we're taking a different approach to the discussion around ADHD. We'll look at the whole person and explore treatment recommendations, the role of medication, the significance of social support, behavioral intervention strategies for managing ADHD symptoms, and practical tools to navigate daily life as an adult with ADHD. Here to walk us through this topic is our guest, Dr. Ned Hallowell. Dr. Hallowell is a board-certified child and adult psychiatrist and world authority on ADHD and was a Harvard Medical School faculty member for 21 years. He's the founder of the Hallowell ADHD Centers in Boston Metro West, New York City, San Francisco, Palo Alto, and Seattle. Welcome to the WebMD Health Discovered podcast, Dr. Hallowell.
Well, it's an honor to join you. Such a great organization as WebMD.
So we are very, very excited to have you and to dig into our conversation on ADHD. But before we do, I'd love to ask about your own personal health discovery and your own aha moment around focusing your practice of psychiatry on ADHD.
I discovered something was different about me in first grade because I couldn't do the primary task of first grade, namely learn to read. September, October, November, I'm still stammering and stuttering as I read. Well, back then, I'm 74 years old, so this was in the 1950s. There were basically two diagnoses in the realm of, learning differences, and there was one treatment plan. So the two diagnoses were smart and stupid, and the one treatment plan was try harder. And I lucked out because I had a first grade teacher who knew there was more to it than that. If you look at the history of how people with these conditions have been treated, it's horrible. You can read accounts of little children who are being basically tortured because they couldn't sit still. They couldn't do what they were told. They'd disobey. They'd speak up. It was standard treatment to humiliate. But I had this wonderful teacher named Mrs. Eldridge. She'd been teaching first grade for about 75 years. And she knew smart and stupid didn't tell the story. So during period, she'd just come over and sit down next to me. And she'd put her arm around me, sort of hugging me. And I would feel so safe. And none of the other kids would laugh at me as I would stammer and stutter because I had the enforcer sitting next to me. And that was my IEP. That was my treatment plan, Mrs. Eldridge's arm.
Wow.
By the end of the year, I was still the worst reader in the class, but I was the most enthusiastic, terrible reader because I looked forward to reading period. And that's pretty amazing to take a 6-year-old little boy and have him look forward to publicly demonstrating his incompetence every day. That's the genius of Mrs. Eldridge, and I think it is the single most important principle in working with anyone, no matter what their strengths or weakness might happen to be. Well, I was the worst reader in the class, but I was the most motivated. I really wanted to learn how to read. That carried me through.
That's an incredible story. And I'm sure it's so relatable for those listening who, at critical moments in their lives and development, had someone step in, intervene, and not only see them, but consistently show up for them. And to me, that highlights the impact of wraparound care, something we often discuss on this podcast. Yeah, the medical model is primary, but social support is also so important for our development. And I'm glad we started with your experience at such a young age. It's so interesting to me that you became a clinician specializing in this field. What was that shift for you? What was it like going into adulthood and eventually being on the other side of the table treating patients with this diagnosis?
I went to a really wonderful medical school called Tulane down in New Orleans. And then I came back to Harvard for postgraduate training and residency. And it wasn't until I was doing my fellowship in child psychiatry that I heard the diagnosis ADD, and it was the great aha moment. It was a July morning, and Elsie Freeman was giving the lecture. And when she started to describe ADD, I just rose up out of my chair. I said, wow, there's a name for this? And I also realized, probably the most important insight of my life, that the medical deficit disorder model left out all the good parts. I think the defining factor of ADHD is imagination. We have a colossal imagination, and we don't know it because we've always had it. And that's what the deficit disorder leaves out the imagination, curiosity. We're driven by curiosity, fast moving brain. I say, we've got a Ferrari engine for a brain. It's just that we've got bicycle brakes. But I made it my business starting then, and that was 1981, to talk to as many people as I could who had this condition, children and adults alike. I talked to them because they were my best textbook. The standard textbooks didn't have anything about the positives. Patients are the best textbook anyway. So I spent the 80s talking to people of all ages. And then with my friend John Rady, wrote a book, came out in 1994 called Driven to Distraction. And we thought, that might sell 10,000 copies if we were lucky. Even popular medical books don't sell much. In fact, I had one publisher say, I don't know about this title, that people are going to think it's a book about cars, Driven to Distraction. Anyway, sold over 2 million copies and is still selling today. And this is what, 1994 to 2024. So 30 years later, it brought this condition to the world. That's just incredibly gratifying. I basically lucked into it because I heard that description and then I said the world doesn't know and needs to know. And then I got lucky because people wanted to know. I love my work because basically people who have ADD improve, they get better. And that's that's what we love. Some doctors, they work in fields where that happens only rarely. In my field, it happens every day, often many times a day. And so it's a long answer to your question, but it's a good question because I hope people listening will understand that there's tremendous positive in here. There's gold in them our hills, so who are afraid of diagnosis or think it does mean you're stupid or it does mean you can't achieve high goals. You've heard of the PCR test, biggest advance in biology in the past 30, 40 years. We're right up there with the double helix. Well, the man who invented the PCR test, the polymerase chain reaction, which we used to diagnose COVID, Kerry Mullis, won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for that invention. And he had flaming ADD. He's since passed away, but you should read his autobiography. It's a very short book, as funny as can be. And he was typical ADD, mild, bouncing all over the place, mind going a mile a minute, irreverent, saying whatever he wanted to say, and contributing a major gift to the world.
Can you tell me about what are some of these interventions that you're seeing as the most robust, most helpful beyond, I think, what would be useful for all of us, which is detoxing from our electronics and sort of really uplifting human connection in our lives?
Well, the thing that happens often that for me is just very moving. Adult women, that's the biggest undiagnosed group of ADD. If an adult woman goes for help, 98% of the time, she'll get diagnosed with anxiety or depression or both, and she'll be put on an SSRI, which is not at all what she needs.
I can truly see why it would be amazing and life changing to have you in the office to talk to if you're coming to sort of discuss and talk through these types of symptoms. How do you think about ADHD medication and The fact that that's been in the news a lot recently is just the shortages of some of these medications. How does that fit into your treatment strategy?
Well, the smaller question is, what about the shortages? And I can talk about that. But the bigger question is, what do I think about medication in general? Medication, when used properly, is very safe. It's been around since, what year amphetamine was first used to treat what we now call ADD? 1937. Most medications have not been around even a quarter that long. And methylphenidate ruling came in the early 1950s. So we've got like 70 years of experience, which is an eternity for a medication. And they proved to be safe and effective. Can you misuse them? Yes, you can. You can misuse water. You certainly can misuse these meds. And so they have to be done under medical supervision. And if you take them within proper parameters, the goal with my patients, I want target symptom improvement with zero side effects other than appetite suppression without unwanted weight loss. You usually do get some appetite suppression. As long as you don't lose a lot of weight, that's fine. But all the other side effects are immediately reversible by lowering the dose or stopping the med. Most common are high blood pressure, elevated heart rate, insomnia, and subjective feelings of not liking it. And if any of those happen, just stop it. And once again, it's not that complicated. And, someone will ask me, do you believe in Ritalin? And I'll say, it's been researched and these are the data. And bottom line, it helps some people and doesn't help others. The ones it helps and doesn't cause side effects, they should take it. And the ones it doesn't help or does cause side effects, they shouldn't take it. And that's it. And it's turned into a big cloud of so much more than that. But boil it down, that's what it is. The other thing is you really want to find out what you need to know about. There's so many misconceptions.
So I want to stop there for a moment because what you said is so important. Highlighting misconceptions about diagnosis and treatment is one of the benefits of having these discussions. So, really often on this podcast, we talk about treating the whole person and taking a step by step approach versus a one size fits all approach. And that means looking at how a diagnosis and treatment plan works for our patients physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, and socially. That's the basis of shared decision making, where the patient is involved in their treatment plan from all of these different vantage points. So, for our adult listeners, whether they're young adults or those like me who are in that sandwich generation, acting as caregivers for young children and older family members, we've got multiple areas of responsibility: professional responsibilities, personal responsibilities in our community. So, when it comes to navigating an ADHD diagnosis in adulthood, it's not really just about medication. Are there other behavioral interventions and social interactions that can help?
The treatment for ADD is never just take a pill, even if the pill works. Always more to it. Education is critical. And there's so much more to it than that, including all the positives. So, education's got to be part of it. Then coaching, you can actually hire a coach or, a career coach, what have you. Learning techniques to get you organized. Like I put a basket next to the front door when I kept losing my car keys, and I'd always train myself to put my car keys.
So let's take it back to the medication again, because many people have misconceptions about what it means to take medication. There's still a stigma that people experience internally and externally. And there might be moments of even shame. When you opened this episode with your story from childhood, it really made me think about how we can internalize messages that there's something wrong with us. And on top of that, there's something wrong with seeking help or support or taking medicines. You seem to have a strengths based approach and highlight the positives. Can you talk a little bit more about medication and accompanying practices that can support people on their journey?
There is an art to prescribing it. It's not easy unless you have a lot of experience with it, but 80% of the time, I can get the result that I want of target symptom improvement with zero side effects other than appetite suppression. But that means 20% I can't. So you want to have a very robust file of non-medication treatments. You want to surround them with improvement of individual skills and learning how to dismantle shame and You can develop your self-esteem. You don't have to wait for it to happen. There are steps you can take. They sound kind of corny, but I have people putting stickies on their bathroom mirror with affirmations that they've made up so they can't make fun of them. Affirmations that they've made up that they have to look at twice a day in the bathroom mirror. You think that doesn't have an impact? It does if you do it regularly. So we work on building self-esteem. We work on learning tricks to help with disorganization. We try to get the monkey of shame off your back, and then define a goal. You want to have a goal. Having a goal improves performance. It just does. And again, I always start with setting the table. Look, we're not here to treat a disability. We're here to take you to the big show. We're here to unwrap your magnificent talents, and I'm not BSing you. That's the truth. I want to get them loaded for bear. I want to get them really motivated. And honestly, like I said at the beginning, the reason I love what I do is you can not always, but most of the time get the result you're looking for.
As you're working together with someone, what do the goalposts of success look like?
Ideally, you write it down at the beginning. What are your goals? What do you hope to achieve? So you have it concrete terms, because our brains are so all over the place. You have one goal 1 minute, another goal the next minute. So let's agree on, a bunch of goals today, knowing that it's subject to change. It's good to have a reference point. It's like when you're losing weight, what's your goal weight? Or earning money, what's your goal? If you get some concrete goals, and then I would add to that, you want to just be happier. You don't have to say specifically how you get.
I am just so thankful for the time that you've shared with us today. I like to close each of my episodes with bite-sized action item for someone who's listening, a change that they can make today that might help them if they're struggling with ADHD. So could you give us some advice?
Yeah, I mean, my first rule of ADD is also my first rule of managing life, and that's never worry alone. If you worry with someone, it quickly becomes problem solving.
What an incredible takeaway for our audience. It really highlights the strengths based perspective you've shared with us throughout this entire episode and helps to reduce the stigma, the shame, isolation that can accompany a diagnosis that impacts our social interactions and can impact us professionally as well. Thank you so much for being with us today. We've talked with Dr. Ned Hallowell about the positive traits of ADHD that are so often left out of the conversation, including curiosity, imagination, and intense focus. We talked about the importance of shared decision making with your healthcare provider so that you find a treatment plan that aligns with your life and responsibilities, as well as the importance of social support, behavioral interventions, and lifestyle changes. To find out more information about Dr. Ned Hallowell, visit drhallowell.com, and we'll have more information about how to connect with him and his work in our show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. If you'd like to send me an email about topics you're interested in or questions for future guests, please send me a note at webmdpodcast@webmd.net. This is Dr. Neha Pathak for the WebMD Health Discovered podcast.